Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of our Code Along with Me C Sharp with Revit API sessions. I'm going to be doing very short, very succinct, brief coding sessions that will help you go from not knowing how to code at all with C Sharp and the Revit API to being comfortable to make some programs on your own. With coding, it really does take a lot of practice to become very proficient. I hope I'm able to bridge the gap between not knowing how to code at all and being comfortable enough to try things out on your own. And I hope you will let me know in the comments if there's anything specific you would like to learn about coding with C Sharp and the Revit API. For this session, we're going to be referencing the Autodesk help documentation for Revit, which is called the Revit Developer's Guide. And I chose this because it's structured in a way that's easy to follow and beginner friendly. Once we are concluded with this part of the sessions, we will go into coding on our own with learning more about how to push your code to GitHub, how to create more robust applications that can be shared, and that sort of thing. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start slow. And so the first thing we want to do is the getting started guide. So first of all, welcome to the Revit Platform API. So what is the Revit API? Well, it's a .NET framework that lets you code with any .NET compliant language, which is usually Visual Basic, C Sharp, and C++. For these sessions though, we will be exploring C Sharp. Autodesk API allows users and external application developers to integrate their applications with Revit. So a key thing to know is that the Revit API itself is the back end of Revit. And so it is all of the tools and functionalities that you are able to access as a Revit user, but also some of the tools and functionalities that you are not able to see with your eyes, but they are running in the background. There are some abilities that Revit has that you are not able to click on as a Revit user, but you are able to access through the API. However, it's important to note that you can't make Revit do anything that it was not designed to do. You can only link an external application that already has the functionality that you're looking for and connect it with the database that Revit already has, but you're not creating a new software. You can't make a new Autodesk Revit that is doing something that Revit was not designed for. One of the reasons it's very hard to do this as well is because Revit is a BIM software. Unlike Rhino, SketchUp, and any of the other 3D modeling applications that are focused more on solid and surface modeling, where you are very flexible with NURBS curves and making forms that are dynamic and interesting, Revit has to be BIM compliant. You need to be able to cut a section, floor plan, elevation, and three-dimensional view of the same object simultaneously. And so there's a bit of a restriction with the things you can do with Revit, but thankfully with the API, you are able to link any other as external application that is able to fulfill the need that you want. So what can you do with the Revit Platform API? You can also use those applications to extract data and generate some kinds of reports because you have access to Revit's database. You can also import data and push that data back into your application. All right, let's get started. So what do you need to get started? Firstly, you need a working understanding of Autodesk Revit. If you don't already have this, there are many resources here on YouTube that you can reference. I would personally recommend the Balkan Architect, among others. For coding, however, I would recommend the Aussie BIM Guru, as that's a very good channel that I have referenced many times myself. You would also need an installation of an Autodesk Revit-based product. So that could be Revit 22, 23, 24, whichever version is most available to you at the time of watching this recording. And when you complete that installation, you are given access to the Revit Software Development Kit. As you can see on my computer, I have navigated to my C drive, and because I have an active installation of both Revit 2022 and Revit 2023, I have been given the software development kit as well. If you're not able to find this in your C drive, you might want to consider running an installation of your Revit software again. And at the splash screen that shows up, the dialog that shows up, you'll be able to choose install developer components as opposed to installing the actual software because you already have that installed. But typically for a standard Revit installation, you should get access to this SDK. And what's in the SDK, you might be wondering. So if we open up this file, you will see that there is a bunch of tools that help you as a first-time coder. You have the add-in manager, some macro samples, the Revit server, the Revit structure explained, and some sample codes. You have some Autodesk icon guidelines for making your own icons because now you're a developer. And you have a getting started guide, a README, some Revit platform API changes and additions, and Revit API CHM. Now, of all of these tools, the one you're most likely to reference the most is the CHM file. The CHM file has what you would find on the web under the Revit API Docs website. It's really an explanation of the different classes and methods in Revit and what they do. And it's a good reference for knowing which of the Revit API tools or data structures you want to leverage. You would also need an active installation of MS Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition. This is your IDE, which is short form for a development environment where you would be coding with C# and the Revit API. There is a difference between the Community Edition and the Professional Edition, and even though the Professional Edition is recommended, for this set of tutorials, we're going to be referencing Visual Studio Community. Now, how do you get that installed? Well, we'll head over to a friendly Google search, and when you search for Visual Studio, here you can see the Community Edition and also the Professional Edition. And what we want is the Community Edition. So when you click on that, it takes you to a page where you can download and follow the installation instructions as you would typically do for any other kind of installation. You need some experience in a .NET based development language, which in this case for Revit API, most of the examples and tutorials you will find are typically in C# and Visual Basic.NET. So we're going to be looking at C#. Stay tuned, and I'll be taking you through how to code with C# as well. If you're already a coder watching this video, I'm sure you're wondering, but I'm able to code with Python. Well, what happens is there are these compilers now available that have been generously created by some people in our community that are able to convert Python language into C# language. And so what you see running as Python is actually a software managing the interpretation between Python and the C# language. So when you think about Revit, it is a .NET framework. You can't access its API without using a .NET friendly language. But thanks to technology, you're able to convert a non-.NET friendly language with one that is friendly. And that's why you're able to code with Python, Dynamo, and all of these other amazing tools. And I'm sure you're wondering, which one should I learn first? Should I be learning Python? Should I be learning Dynamo? Should I be learning C#? Honestly, when it comes to coding and programming, the most important skill is the creativity, the problem solving, and understanding the fundamentals of object-oriented programming. Once you are able to understand these fundamentals, you are able to code without restriction, without limitation. It doesn't matter the language you learn first, it becomes even much easier to pick up a language. Personally, I find that learning more difficult languages helps me learn the more easy languages better. So, for example, when I learned C# first, I was able to pick up Python much faster. So, what do I recommend learning first? Personally, I found learning C# to be more helpful. It is, however, a more steep learning curve than Python. So depending on your learning style, if you prefer to cut your teeth on something that's a bit chewy first, I would say to go with C#. But if you prefer something easier so you're not intimidated by the journey, there are a lot of Python for Revit tutorials on YouTube. Eric Fritz is a very good one. I would recommend looking at those channels. But for us, we're going to be diving into C Sharp without any hesitation. So thank you for sticking around this long. In the next videos, we're going to be playing around with some C Sharp fundamentals and also learning more about Visual Studio Community. See you there.